So hi everyone, and welcome to sunny Munich. It makes a change from yesterday in London where it was very wet and very windy, so I'm glad to be here today. About IDC, we are a global market research company, so we look at technology trends, how companies are adopting it, how different verticals use technology differently, and how vendors develop and build it, and how partners take to market and build solutions around it. So today I'd like to just take you through a view of how we as market researchers are seeing changes in the market that are really driving your business going forwards, where you should be looking to invest and pay attention going forwards. So I'd just like to start by really highlighting a trend that you're probably well aware of, but just trying to accentuate how broad this is. We're essentially having a digital revolution as everything becomes data-enabled. We've got traditional goods and services which are being made better with data. So for example, taxis. Uber's come in and shown a new model, how you can hail a taxi and pay for it fully digitally, really linking up supply and demand together, whereas in the past you'd have had to hunt for something and then maybe paying cash. But then think about what happened in the pandemic with Uber. It entered the pandemic as a leading taxi company, and by a few weeks into the pandemic, it was then a leading fast food delivery company. So again, digital platforms really make companies agile and help them transform as the market changes. But we're also seeing new, completely digital goods and services, completely new industries coming, online gaming, online gambling, real-time insurance, autonomous cars, etc. And this means that we're going to be dealing with a lot more data. Everything's going to be data-driven, and the experience is utterly dependent on the way it is tied together. And then we're going to be seeing a lot more hybrid and virtual working. Maybe the pandemic has shown us new ways that you can work. We may not all want to work fully virtual all the time, so hybrid is really how many people are going to want to work. But that means connecting everything as seamlessly as possible. And as consumers and as employees and workers, these digital aspects are really touching all our life, so driving data forwards. And it's being enhanced by ubiquitous connectivity with 5G, devices being intelligent and talking to each other with IoT. We've got hybrid multi-clouds, whether it's in our own data centers, in third-party data centers, or public cloud, and it's all from edge to core to cloud. So everything is linking up and talking to each other. And what we often find is that at the forefront of technology, we are often sometimes blind to see the changes this makes in the broader market. 20 years ago, we didn't have touchscreen phones. These days, if you don't have a touchscreen phone, it just feels unnatural. And watching movies, you can see how dated it is by whether it's got a flip phone with a keypad versus an iPhone, for example. And you can tell by which generation. We're being defined by digital and data. And that means businesses are shifting IT from being a back office efficiency enabler, and we'll be distributing the slides after, so you shouldn't need to take photos of everyone. We'll send a PDF of all of these after as well. But businesses are really moving their back ends to cater for an entire end-to-end operation. So no longer just about back office efficiency being maybe a bit more operationally centric. Now it's about the entire experience. So integrating supply chain, integrating R&D and employees in manufacturing, integrating the go-to-market, and the entire customer experience. So digital in your customers is becoming a bigger part of the actual business itself. It's no longer a 1% to 2% of revenues investment. This is thinking more like a sales investment. It needs to be more. It needs to be maybe 5, 6, 7, even more % if the customer experience is depending on this. And this is where a lot of your growth and revenue opportunity and margins will be coming from in future, is targeting a lot of this shift as more of the business moves to software. And at every intersection of data and apps and services, there's an opportunity for integration, for management, for services. And the more we interconnect, the more value there is to be had from the ecosystem of data and transfers. And that means companies are moving to a data-driven mindset. So they're relying a lot more on big data and analytics to help drive investment and decisions, using techniques like AI in their actual business models. And we recently did a survey of various verticals, and for example, retail says AI is absolutely critical for their competitive success. They're driving so hard with that. We've got healthcare coming along just behind. They're moving to innovation-centric, so IT is being moved from an operations competency to an innovation platform. and a springboard for the future. But it means companies need less complexity of building that platform and more expertise and ability to just run apps and services going forwards. So again, a lot of opportunity to tie into that, to invest in solving the complexity riddle for customers. And customers want it to be always on and rapidly available in time to market. We can't take 12 to 18 months to launch a product. It needs to be 3 to 6 months. So how do you move to a DevOps, keep it secure, have GRC and everything else that you need to make a successful solution? And this whole shifting application portfolio and the fact that we're moving to an explosion of apps and services that all need to be tied together means there's opportunities for new business for you. As this explosion of apps comes to market and companies move to cloud-native architectures, you'll be seeing that you'll be touching more and more the apps and services that customers need as you build the platforms that they'll be deploying them on. You'll find your value proposition rises up far above the pure hardware, up into the stack and the management, and trying to really remove a lot of the headache that customers have of building and operating an underlying IT platform. So in the course of today, after that little introduction of how data is really changing our lives in the landscape, we're going to have a quick look at how changes are impacting the market, where you could be thinking of investing for success based on what MSP research is telling us, understanding where your customers may be on a transformation journey to help you engage most effectively. We're going to look at where to focus your skills and attention as we move beyond the underlying platform. In particular, we're also going to touch on green, because in today's day and age, it is becoming even more vital. And we're going to end with looking what you should look for in a strategic partner to help you build your business. So where are we in terms of partnering between the vendor landscape and your end customers? Well, we've moved on from the past, which was very transactional, focused more on the kit itself. What we started to do is move much more into a relationship-based way of selling, a much more software-driven way where we're expecting multiple different systems to talk to each other. We've moved from bare metal to virtualized to containers. We've moved now to cloud-native architectures. And what that means is the underlying platform is a bit more commoditized, and that means as MSPs, the value is now on top of that. Just like in the past, Windows commoditized the PC, it commoditized the server space, the value came from the apps and services running on top. And the value in IT infrastructure going forward is not in building and putting in servers and storage per se, but it's how you link them together and make them deliver value and add value to those apps and services. So I like to think of it as software-defined but hardware-accelerated. If you have the right underpinnings, it can really help make a difference in how you put it together and particularly how you run it, and the long-term cost of operations coming down enough to help you make a profit. It's moving towards a much more collaborative view. A lot of your customers will actually be starting to lack skills in the digital space. So your opportunity is to train or attract and recruit skills, keep them, because your customers are going to have less and less of the skills required, and this is an entry point and a point of differentiation for yourselves long term. And then moving forward into, say, 2025, this evolution will continue. We'll continue going further up the stack towards business-focused applications and services. You'll probably find over that time you may need a different set of sales skills in your businesses, ones that touch not only just on the technical side, but more specifically into the vertical and business problem space, talking to the board, talking to the actual business leaders, rather than the IT side of the business. And in particular, it's about collaboration. So it's not about having to build absolutely everything yourself, although where it makes sense, investment in that is going to be key, but it's identifying where there is enough commoditization for you to actually buy in skills and expertise from others to get something done so that your investment can add value on top of that. So keep an eye out for where you can basically co-create intellectual property, make use of someone else's investment as much as possible. And it's all about moving to agility. And in an age of flexible consumption, who here has not heard of a flexible consumption model, by the way? Anyone? Where you pay for resources as you use either compute or capacity. Everyone familiar with the concept? So in my conversation with CIOs and business leaders, they're all wanting their IT to go in this direction but they're fighting their own culture at this point. It's a slow journey, but they're all really wanting to move towards paying for what they use in a cloud-like manner, but having the control of, say, on-premises infrastructure that is dedicated to them and more directly managed by them. So in this move forward, you need to be more agile. It's more of a transient opportunity, and the infrastructure we're going to have to build has to be able to plug in and scale and add value as we move forwards. And therefore, what we see happening specifically in the MSP space is that you're going to be led a lot more by outcomes. So at the start of engagements, you're really going to be having to think about how are we actually going to prove the value we add? What do we need to monitor? How do we get the data? How do we analyze it and report back over time to show the value that we can give to customers? It also needs to be led really by the business. And what we're finding now is there's more and more internal debate about internal IT versus public cloud. How do we justify a large investment in our own internal IT infrastructure when there's public cloud out there? So more and more you need to be engaging with the business, winning the argument that working with your customers to provide more private IT infrastructure and services in a managed way is actually competitive with public cloud, but also offers a lot of differentiation for security, risk, performance, etc. To differentiate, it's about investing a lot in intellectual property. Where does your value lie in terms of what you're offering the business? So do you have vertical expertise? Do you have particular technical expertise? And going forwards, we'd argue you need a combination of both. So the more verticalized you can get, the better off you'll be longer term. And the other thing to recognize is customers always want more for less. So the more you can scale, the more you can reuse investment multiple times, the more you can actually look to create margins even while being cost competitive and looking to strip cost over time. So what does this really mean to you? Well, if you've got strong IP, you've got assets that you can reuse and engage with. It enables you to differentiate in the market. It gives you a value add that you can really take to customers. And the repeatability, which is key, is how do you persuade a customer that what you've built is unique to them, but you can reuse time and time again. So it's about making sure you've got building blocks that can plug together to customize what is actually delivered, but it doesn't have to be bespoke end-to-end each time. And the key here again is if you choose what's actually commoditizing versus what's differentiated, you're not going to be competing with, say, more broadline providers who can just provide a service at volume, as basically sell it as widely as they can and provide it very cheaply. For your customers, there's reduced risk because it's a proven solution over multiple customers, and there's a faster time to value because you're not having to completely reinvent things every time. I mean, I still go and talk to customers who are trying to build a private cloud, and rather than getting something like Azure Stack HCI, they're trying to pull together a whole bunch of different technologies to do the billing, the deployment, everything else. Whereas other companies, they're putting in Google Anthos or Azure Stack, etc., and they're just moving ahead with their deployments. And that's the type of thing to be looking for. What's the transition in the market that really means you can build a value on top of a platform that's pre-built rather than having to build your own? And so it comes down to a mix of where do you partner or where do you invest yourself? And what we're finding is that in the actual infrastructure space itself, close to the hardware, so far there has been a reluctance to really partner or cross-sell to develop solutions. Now, as we move to essentially software-defined but hardware-accelerated infrastructure, what we feel is that with the automation and orchestration and cloud-native platforms that are coming, where you need to be focused on is making sure the hardware you have actually supports the platforms that are running. So put more effort into choosing what makes the difference in a hardware design that can actually help you manage and run the services using, say, these new standardized stacks that are coming out. Is there intelligence built into the platform? Have they taken a different approach? Or is it just more of the same thinking, not really moving the needle forward? So if we compare infrastructure to what's happening elsewhere, particularly security in other areas, we can see security already is fairly cross-sell or partnering to deliver. And going forwards, this is what we are looking to happen as well in the infrastructure space across servers, storage, and networking. So look to partner to deliver some of the base infrastructure platform capabilities, and then look above in terms of how do you optimize, how do you deliver the best service the right mix of capabilities for the workloads, and particularly new and emerging workloads as well. One example, for example, can be looking at how AI-infused is a platform. So AI Ops is very much coming to the fore in the most digitally transformed organizations to help them really deploy their infrastructure and optimize it, make sure that they're using the least overhead and delivering the most value without a lot of human intervention. If you work with a vendor that can build this in right from the silicon itself through the various layers of software up to the actual delivery, then you can have a better opportunity for an optimized service that costs you less to provide, and therefore you can be more competitive in your bids and still make margin. So the more you can work with companies that are investing at the bottom end, taking a lot of the complexity of setup and configuration out, allowing you to deliver quickly but still make margin at the end, the better off you'll be. So for example, Huawei is a great example of an integrated vendor, making the silicon, making the software, making even the interconnect with the network as well. So for storage, for server, for network, it's a really good example of a company that can do everything. One of the other things we were looking at is it time to invest for growth, or is it time to be sitting back and being cautious? And in some recent research we did just at the end of last year, we were looking at what would MSPs do if they had available cash to invest. And a few years ago, there was maybe more about thinking about, well, we have to conserve some money, we don't know what's happening, we're going to be cautious. Going forwards, that's changing. So a lot of the MSPs we're talking to are looking at expansion. So they're building out a delivery platform, they're building out sales recruitment, they're planning on targeting innovation in adjacent industries, adjacent verticals as well. So the time now is to think about how do we get the margins and get this to invest for growth. We need to build an infrastructure delivery platform that is next-gen and cost-effective for us to run, but also allows us to develop new apps and services for our customers. There's also some interest in M&A at the moment, but I'd say at this point, most of the MSPs we're talking about are so focused on their core set of propositions that the M&A is, at this point, a secondary strategy going forwards. One of the things we have seen is customer diversification as well. So how many here are selling mainly to just one industry versus, say, 3, 4, or 5? Anyone selling to less than 5 industries? No, all fairly diverse? So we find quite a few are selling maybe to 1 or 2 industries, particularly if they're military or government or finance. But what we found is, again, that the mix of other industries in total add up to far more than some of these major technology-led industries. So the more you can focus your solutions on being cross-industry, so a great horizontal component, but remembering that in an end-to-end digital solution, you'll have to have industry-specific apps and services. So marketplaces are key. Integrating the key vertical applications is going to be absolutely critical for your success. But probably even more than that is understanding where your customers are on their transformation journey. So at IDC, we've been researching the technology market for over 40 years. And typically, we've taken an IT maturity-based approach of looking at, say, typically 5 levels of IT maturity, from very ad hoc to very professionally run. In this case, we've divided into 3. So about a quarter of the market are what we'd call digital leaders, who are very digitally transformed. These guys are very automated and orchestrated. They pretty much run all 12, say, elements of advanced IT infrastructure capabilities. But your opportunity really is the digital mainstream and digital followers. So these are companies that are just starting their transformation journey. They can do with a lot of help getting to where they need to be. That's fully 50% of the market. It does tend to be, say, small and medium up to mid-market customers rather than full enterprise. But these customers also have a chance to grow, and they're easy to engage with and grow with them as well. So our advice is, if you can work with these customers to understand where they are on their journey, and you can help move along at the same rate and grow with them and develop services, you'll help their transition to a digital leader by maybe a factor of 5 to 10 years, because in my 20 years of researching IT service delivery, typical IT transformation, if it's just organic, takes 15, 20 years unless you have a disruptive event in many companies. but we're looking to move to external providers, and companies are looking for hand-holding to take them forwards. And as a managed service provider, you have an ideal opportunity because, to be honest, most companies are not looking at full outsourcing, but what they want is they want a lot of help to run what they've got. So your role is really to come in, provide a lot of operational experience and expertise, and help them to understand how to take IT forward and really partner with them to transform their IT. So if we're looking at moving beyond just the underlying platform itself, so assuming the technology is there and you're working with a great vendor who can provide AI ops and other things to help you deliver, in our service provider pulse of August of last year, we were looking at where companies are expanding their coverage. So if we're looking at those that provide infrastructure as a service capabilities, this is essentially compute and storage and networking on demand delivered to customers. Where are they today? Well, focused a lot on storage, compute, and networking. It's not a surprise. But going forwards, they're moving towards essentially load balancing, so helping optimize the delivery of applications more dynamically, and bundling things like integrated SaaS. So getting much more into the actual application delivery itself, rather than just providing the underlying hardware. So it's about a stack, and then it's about the apps and services being delivered more dynamically. If we move to PaaS, so PaaS has a bit more of the same, particularly around security, storage, and networking. But if we look at this, it's also about the bundled SaaS, but particularly also databases and getting into that data layer. And the more opportunities you have to tie into the data itself, the more opportunities you have to actually tie into getting value out of that data, whether it's maintaining the data integrity and cleansing it, integrating it with other systems, making sure that it performs across all of the different interconnects and translations that it has to go through to deliver value. And it also takes you much further up the stack. It allows you to get more into actual business change and the actual digital aspects of the business and tie into the new innovative side of IT delivery rather than the back office efficiency side. And then to really succeed, you've also got to go green. You've really got to be in it you've got to be fully in with green and certified and accredited to start winning some of the bigger deals that are coming through. Our research shows that many companies today are actually ensuring that those who are responding to RFPs have to have green or ESG credentials, often in partnership with certain vendors, in order to be able to participate in a bid. And we can see it's very, very important across many industries, manufacturing and retail particularly. Banking and finance, a little bit behind. We find banking and finance will focus more on ultimate performance, but then on green, whereas, for example, retail and logistics and others will focus more on green first. Maybe a bit of opportunity as well for government. So government often setting the regulations, not so good at following them. So where have we heard that before? But one of the keys this year that makes it even more important is essentially a lot of green and ESG is about removing waste. And a lot of data centers are just horrendous for wasting energy. So we've got data centers that often have a PUE over 2 versus, say, almost close to 1 for a hyperscaler or 1.3 for a colo. So huge amounts of energy just being wasted in a traditional data center. And if you can help customers move infrastructure from that into a better delivery model in a better data center, that's immediate overhead that can be cut. The other side, of course, is providing much more efficient, much more performance per watt for compute and storage. And in that way, you can really help customers reduce bills. And a lot of that is about dynamic workload management, but also understanding what's actually in use. Can you measure the performance? Can you measure the power? And actually identify the worst performers and have an upgrade and a refresh that takes out the worst performers and puts in place much better, much more modern equipment. But going forwards, a lot of this is also going to be dependent on the brand and how you basically engage with the management of the company to understand their ESG requirements as well. So while in the short term, cost reduction is an absolutely essential engagement model, this is a conversation that has to go right up through the business to succeed long term. And for what you're really wanting to succeed in how you go to market in this changing world, what you really need is a vendor who can work with you to win business. So time and again, when we talk to any type of channel partner, ease of doing business is pretty much always the number one area. If a vendor can't help us actually win the business in front of us and make it easy, then it's actually, we'd rather work with someone else. So when you're searching for a vendor, look for one who's prepared to work with you. If a problem comes up, they are not running away. They're actually proactively there, helping you minimize it, helping you overcome it, and help you engage with the customer. But critically as well is the availability of a lot of support resources, whether that's pre-sales resources, whether it's technical documentation, whether it's training and accreditation, whether it is post-sales support and second, third line. For example, the vendors you work with have to be set up to actually scale with you, with expertise and content and capabilities as you grow with your customers. Then comes best-in-class technology and products. So still very important, but by far the most important thing in today's world is ease of doing business. I can't tell you how many times I've seen vendors go, well, we've got such great product, why can't we sell them? We just do a survey of the channel, like, how easy do you think it is to do business with vendors X, Y, Z, etc. And they go, well, that vendor there is so easy to do business with, even if it's not the best product, that's the one we're going to push every day of the week. So very, very, very important to work with vendors who help your business. So what would we really be leaving you with from looking at a vendor for the future? Well, one is to have an ability to offer consumption-led models. So your customers are going to be wanting this, pay-as-you-go, very flexible, scalable infrastructure. Ease of doing business we've talked about, but brand value and kudos as well. So global brands that are understood, that are positively seen in the market. Visibility on roadmaps, work with vendors that are willing to open up to you, just as you're willing to invest with them. If vendors aren't willing to disclose what's happening 2 to 3 years down so you can plan ahead and get your investments in sync, then there is an issue in engagement. Transparency of financial benefits, so in the engagement program, making sure that you know what the targets are, what type of margins or rebates you'll be able to get back, and making that very predictable and non-controversial. And preventing channel conflict. So again, ideally your partners would be 100% channel and no conflict at all, but ideally working with a vendor that even if they go direct is a direct touch, not a direct sale, and doesn't want to displace, but make sure that they have appropriate ground rules in place. And so our key takeaways really for your business moving forwards is invest in infrastructure now. We're seeing a wave of demand coming in the future. It started during the pandemic, but it's going to accelerate and continue as we move ever more digital. Build out new sales capabilities, particularly in particular verticals or into particular application areas to help you sell services on the delivery infrastructure. And focus on new data-centric opportunities rather than just, say, storage-centric. So think about how do you move up the stack through the databases and into the apps and services themselves, because that's where the ongoing margin will be. For your customers, I would say find out where they are on their journey and their appetite for change. And sometimes they'll be resistant, some will be more acceptant of change. But work with them rather than against them. So if the culture is not to move that quickly, anything you do is not going to make them move that much more quickly unless something happens to them. Focus on optimization services for the most digitally transformed because they're already at that high level, but focus more on transformation for those that are less mature, and particularly work green and efficiency into your customer engagement and messaging. And for your vendor partners, again, ease of doing business, but choose vendors that are investing heavily in the overall proposition, putting intelligence into the platforms to make your life easier to build value add on top, rather than having to reinvent the wheel constantly to get the infrastructure to perform. And particularly as well, invest with your vendors in key certifications and skills, because there is a skill shortage today across many different parts of IT. Your customers are having trouble recruiting good people. They find it lucky if they can find them, and they have to pay over the odds to keep them. To be honest, as a service provider, you're going to struggle yourself to keep some people over the years. It often takes 3 or 4 years for someone to get skilled enough to want to set up on their own. How do you retain them 3, 4, 5 years down the line? So you're going to have a constant wave of recruitment of skills and keeping training going to invest in your own differentiation and talent. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention and invite you to enjoy this service provider track with Huawei. And I would like to hand it back. Thank you.